this started with the recording. All right, welcome everybody, and we'll have some fun today. Rob, what we'll do to get this meeting started is the third step prayer.
On page 63 of your big book. I hope everybody's got your big book handy, a highlighter, a pen, and a piece of paper. Remember, this is a facilitated meeting, which means we take questions at the end. Also, this is being recorded, but only the audio portion only is being recorded, and only other facilitators. So that when it comes time for questions, the video or the audio will be shut down so that your anonymity will be protected.
Yep.
So page 63, the third step prayer. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
All right, thank you, Rob. We are on page 52. We're going to go up a paragraph before we get started where we were left off last time. So we're going to start off in, but in most fields, our generation has witnessed.
Page 52, everybody. But in most fields, our generation has witnessed complete liberation of our thinking. Show any longshoreman a Sunday supplement describing a proposal to explore the moon by means of a rocket, and he will say, I bet they do it. Maybe not so long either. And it is not our age characterized by the ease with which we discard old ideas for new, by the complete readiness with which we throw away the theory or gadget which does not work for something new which does.
Yep. And so what we're doing is kind of prepping ourselves up for this next paragraph, and it's kind of putting to, discarding old ideas for new. The idea that this is back in the 30s. So talking about Bill being a visionary in regards to being on a rocket all the way to the moon. Certainly within about 30 years or so, we actually did it. So so just because we aren't doing it now doesn't mean we won't do it. Doesn't mean we can't do it. And we need to be kind of prepared to think of new ideas and discard the old ones as well. And we'll do that as we get into this. This next paragraph, what we'll do is we'll read the paragraph, and then I'll ask Rob to identify each of the bedevilments and that sort of thing. All right.
Okay. And Leo, I'm going to change the we to I so that you can really, it hammers home the point that Bill here is trying to make. I had to ask myself why I shouldn't apply to my human problem the same readiness to change my point of view. I was having trouble with personal relationship. I couldn't control my emotional natures. I was a prey to misery and depression. I couldn't make a living. I had a feeling of uselessness. I was full of fear. I was unhappy. I couldn't seem to be of any real help to other people. Was not a basic solution of these bedevilments more important than whether I should see newsreels of lunar flight? Of course it was.
And this is an unrecovered situation kind of deal. Let's go ahead and identify each of the bedevilments, Rob.
Okay. Yeah, the first one is I was having trouble with personal relationships. 2, I couldn't control my emotional nature. 3, I was a prey to misery and depression. 4, I couldn't make a living. 5, I had a feeling of uselessness. 6, I was full of fear. 7, I was unhappy. 8, I couldn't seem to be of real help to other people.
Right. So we've got the 8 bedevilments. And if you kind of think about this, so I was having trouble with personal relationships. Obviously, as an alcoholic, we've probably been there. We've said the things that we've said, which have been probably negative or in poor taste, and therefore has struggled with not only making personal relationships, but keeping them. Couldn't control your emotional natures. Obviously, a lot of us that drink probably lashed out at people, especially when they were trying to get us to stop drinking. If we, the prey to misery and depression, that might apply to a couple of people. Some people are just in that kind of depressive state and find themselves drinking because of it. Couldn't make a living. Number of us either have not been able to get a job or keep a job, or we've lost a job because of our drinking. Either we haven't shown up on time, we habitually were late, or we found ourselves coming to work drunk, and at that point in time we're asked to go home, and at that point obviously we weren't able to keep that job, as far as that's concerned, and full of fear. I think people get in those states. They, afraid of something. They want to hide. They want to drown their fears, and try and find kind of that liquid courage, if you will. So there's some kind of ways of applying this, of being full of fear. And we were unhappy. A lot of people. I was one of those that drank because I was either unhappy or angry. I had a streak in me. I had the Heckets, and people would be on me about my drinking, and I would get upset. I would get resentful, and anger would enter in, and I would say, "I'll show you." And sure enough, I would start drinking, thinking that somehow I was going to control it, and certainly I did not. And alcohol won over. And being of help to other people. When I drank, I was of no help. And when I wasn't drinking, I wasn't really thinking about other people. I was thinking about myself. I was being incredibly selfish, and found myself not really wanting to reach out and assist other people, irrespective of trying to reach out on helping people with their alcoholism, just helping people in general. I was just not a very pleasant person, as far as that's concerned. And that's kind of what we want to talk about as far as the bedevilments. Now, we'll get there. I'm not going to go over them now because we're going to get there in just a little bit. But on page 63, which is the opposite of the bedevilments, at the top of page 63, there are actually 9 promises. And we'll cover those in detail when we get there. But it starts with that first paragraph up there. And we have of the 9 promises, and like I said, we'll cover those in more detail later. But that is the opposite of the bedevilments, as most people will say. Rob?
Yeah, a lot of people you don't have to be alcoholic to suffer from these bedevilments. It's a human condition that we all suffer from. We alcoholics suffer from it because we're selfish and self-centered, and this is what we're showing. We only think about ourselves. Okay. We couldn't help other people because we were too focused on ourselves. We were unhappy because people didn't behave the way we thought they should behave. These are all the things that humans suffer from, not just alcoholics. So that's why, in the book, they talks about, this program is great for all people, for everybody, because it gets us through these human conditions. Remember, we agnostics, and what we're trying to do is Bill's idea is to get people to change their way of thinking about, a higher power, God in their life. Push aside your old prejudices. As we read, in 1938, when Bill was working on the book, he's talking about man landing on the moon. 30 years later, which isn't a long time in the time, man landed on the moon. So this is a vision that who would have thought, So these are incredible things that are happening. So put aside your prejudice and what you think God is. Okay, lay aside that. What would you like God to be? And that's what we're trying to get to. When we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did.
Yeah, and we're getting into now thinking in terms of giving yourself over, really starting to let go and to stop doubting the power of a higher power, and really trying to get into that, as I've described even as earlier today, into that meditative state where you can actually let things go, relax, kind of let it envelop you. As I describe it, it's like being in the deep end of a pool and about a foot or two under the water and just kind of floating there in silence and completely being surrounded by water, top to bottom. And really starting to find that joy, find that happiness in that there is something good that you are a part of. And it's in that you start to find that self-confidence, that you're going to be able to find that inner strength and be able to do this. And so we're kind of starting to think in terms of that. Rob?
Okay. The Wright brothers, almost childish faith that they could build a machine which would fly was the mainspring of their accomplishment. Without that, nothing could have happened. We agnostics and atheists were sticking to the idea that self-sufficiency would solve our problems. When others showed us that God's sufficiency worked with them, we began to feel like those who had insisted the Wright brothers would never fly.
Yeah, and that is true. There were a lot of naysayers in that regard. And so therefore, we're also saying that we aren't going to believe in a higher power. And so we felt like that we were the ones that are like looking around saying, well, it's not working for me. It can't work for me. It won't work for me. Yet when I look at Rob, I see that it does. And so maybe I need to change my frame of reference. Maybe I need to change my mind. Maybe I need to open it up and be more accepting, etc. Rob?
Yeah, the Wright brothers, they thought that man could fly. Everybody else thought man couldn't fly. In 1903, the Langley's flying machine went to the bottom of Potomac. Everybody thought that no man would ever be able to fly. Just a very short period of time from them, the Wright brothers were successful. And a lot of different newsreels didn't want to cover the story because they didn't believe it. Bill said something last week that I hadn't thought of in quite a while. And he talked about the wind. We cannot see the wind, but we can see the effects that wind has. We can see the leaves blowing across the grass. We see the trees sway in the breeze. Okay, we can't see God, but we can see the things that He's done in our lives. Okay, and it was a beautiful. Last week, there was also another saying that I wanted to say, but I couldn't remember how it started off, and it threw me off. My reading was a little bit taken off because my mind was going around in circles, trying to think what was it I was trying to say, and it was coincidence is God's way of staying anonymous, and what a beautiful saying that is because things happen in our lives that we have no rhyme or reason. Why did I stay out of that place? Why was I not in that accident? Why did something good happen in my life? I can put it down to luck, instinct. People talk about their gut instinct, but to me, it's God working in my life and what He's done for me and what He continues to do for me. And that, what? Before I tried to be God, I tried to be Rob reliant. Life didn't work very well. Well, let's be honest. I ended up here and I learned how to be God reliant, how to be God conscious, how to rely on Him instead of myself. Okay. Now it's God's will, not my will. Be done. So logic is great stuff. We liked it. We still like it. It is not by chance we were given the power to reason, to examine the evidence of our senses, and to draw conclusions. That is one of man's magnificent attributes. We agnostically inclined would not feel satisfied with a proposal which did not lend itself to reasonable approach and interpretation. Hence, we are at pains to tell why we think our present faith is reasonable, why we think it more sane and logical to believe than not to believe, why we say our former thinking was soft and mushy when we threw up our hands in doubt and said, we don't know.
Yeah, and there is some logic to this, and we agnostically inclined would not feel satisfied with a proposal which does not lend itself to reasonable approach and interpretation. It at that point in time when you think our present faith is reasonable, it's more sane and logical to believe than not to believe. why we say our former thinking was soft and mushy. It's really kind of a change in heart, and really start to just be willing to believe. And that's kind of an important point here to reemphasize, is that willingness to believe. And throwing up our arms in doubt, we said we don't know. Well, that's actually the first kind of step in order to get to that point. Instead of saying I won't know, you're saying I don't know, but I'm willing. And I think it's important to kind of put it that way. Don't instead of won't becomes I'm willing to believe. Rob?
Yeah, I have a note at the top of this page. Not that it pertains to this page per se, but it's fear is a faith that bad things will happen. Faith in God is a belief that good things will happen. So all day long, I try to know that good things are going to happen. Bad things along the way will happen. And I always think that, there's a reason for it. I don't have to know the reason for it. I just have to accept the fact that, you know what, there's somebody a lot bigger than me that's making sure that things are happening. Now, when I say things like that, I also have responsibilities. It is my responsibility to do the best I can to help other people. I have power that comes into my house, but unless I get up off my rear end and hit the power switch, the lights aren't going to come on by themselves. I have responsibilities. If I continue to do my responsibilities, I will be looked after. That is my belief. That is my thinking. That is my faith. And that's what I live by. So, faith in God, that good things will happen. But as I say, along the way, bad things are going to happen. But my belief is that God is going to look after me. He's got my back. That's my conception.
Yeah, and real quick, Rob, it's the difference between dwelling on the bad and anticipating the good. So if you can change your frame of reference to anticipate the good, you'll find that you're not dwelling on the bad. And I think that's an important point to make.
Yeah, Leo, you made a great point. We can dwell on the bad and we can live in it. But we also have to, belief in a power greater than ourselves is that good things are going to be coming. Okay. And, too many people dwell on the negativity in life, but that's being selfish and self-centered. We're only thinking about ourselves. So I'm in a good mood. As you can see, I feel close to my higher power, and I want everybody else to be able to have it. You know what? I just celebrated 9 years and of sobriety. Yeah, thank you very much. It's not me. It's this program and my higher power. But in 9 years, I've not smiled as much or enjoyed life as much. I was miserable. I was sad. I was suicidal at times, or I shouldn't say suicidal, but I didn't care whether I lived or died. And that's a terrible way to be. Now I'm enjoying life. I enjoy the people that are around me, and I enjoy this fellowship so much. And I want other people that were feeling the same way to have that eternal smile, to be able to enjoy life. Oh well, I'm gonna get off my soapbox right now. Let's get back to the book. When we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposing crisis, we could not postpone or evade. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be?
Well, go ahead and just keep reading on that.
You got it. Arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with the question of faith. We couldn't duck the issue. Some of us had already walked far over the bridge of reason toward the desired shore of faith. The outlines and the promise of the new land brought luster to tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits. Friendly hands had stretched out in welcome. We were grateful that reason had brought us so far, but somehow we couldn't quite step ashore. Perhaps we had been leaning too heavily on reason that last mile, and we did not like to lose our support.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people interpret this, God is everything or else he is nothing. God is or he isn't. And it's not that black and white. The fact is our choice would be to actually not duck the issue and get us so that we have reason that gets us to a certain point. And then from there, you kind of open yourself up to the fact that there is something bigger and greater than us. You just have to look outside and see that, yeah, science can get us so far, but then something else out there has to have had some control and some ability to bring us to that next level. What was it that got us to where we are in this whole, let's call it a universe, but it's even bigger than the universe as far as that's concerned, and the significance of that. There is something else afoot, as I would put it, that is bringing us to the shore of faith, and really it is that it's that belief that something can happen, and the faith that something will happen, and it's that idea that you get to getting to from point A to point B. Rob?
Yeah, here we're going from being self-centered to God-centered. So that was natural, but let us think a little more closely. Without knowing it, had we not been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith? Or did we not believe in our own reasoning? Did we not have confidence in our ability to think? What was that but a sort of faith? Yes, we had been faithful, abjectly faithful to the God of reason. So in one way or another, we discovered that faith had been involved all the time.
Yeah, kind of a revelation here. Faith has been a part of us all along. It's that faith in your ability to do something, and sure enough, you did it. You accomplished, and you moved forward, and you had something to be proud of, that you were able to accomplish whatever, and you felt successful. There was a bit of faith involved in your own ability. So if you can have faith in yourself, why not? Why wouldn't you have faith in something bigger than yourself? And that is your higher power. Rob?
Yep. We found too that we've been worshipers. What a state of mental goose flesh that used to bring on. Had we not variously worshipped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves? And then with a better motive, had we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or a flower? Who of us had not loved something or somebody? How much did these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? Little or nothing, we saw at last. Were not these things the tissue out of which our lives were constructed? Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? It was impossible to say we had no capacity for faith, or love, or worship. In one form or another, we had been living by faith and little else.
Yeah. So where do you spend most of your time and energy thinking? Think about where you're spending your time. Bottom line is that you have been worshiping something other, whatever it might be. You've loved something, whatever that might be, and you've had faith. So you've had it all the time. And what Bill's trying to do in a subtle kind of way is, in a sense, kind of trick you into realizing that you have been faithful to something for your entire life. And it's not just reason that got you there. It's something else. So if you're able to believe in that, which it would be hard pressed not to, why not be able to believe in something bigger than yourself? And again, it's really just trying to get you from point A to point B, knowing that you got there already in some other form or fashion. And now all you're doing is just taking an extra step and going in another direction and saying, yeah, I can have faith in something bigger than me. I can love, and guess what? I can give back. And if I'm starting to think about other people, well, I've already started to expand and do something bigger than myself. So just keep taking it to the next step, the next level, and sure enough, you're going to find a higher power. Rob?
Beautiful, Leo. Thank you. Imagine life without faith. Were nothing left but pure reason, it wouldn't be life. But we believed in life. Of course we did. We could not prove life in the sense that you can prove a straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points. Yet there it was. Could we still say the whole thing was nothing but a massive electron, created out of nothing, meaning nothing, whirling on to a destiny of nothingness? Of course we couldn't. The electrons themselves seem more intelligent than that, at least so the chemist said.
Yeah. And boy, are there just time and again, there is something out there that just science can't fully explain. And I don't know, when I watch the cells divide and create, somehow I think that there's something bigger. For me, that's my answer to when somebody says, well, if it's not scientifically proven, I'm not going to believe in it. And I say, well, then how do you explain cell division and creating a life? And it's really hard to kind of put your finger on that. And I say to myself, that is something bigger. That is something greater than anything that we as humans can really, explain. And that's where I find that's where I started my belief in something greater and bigger than myself, was in something as small as cell division, but it was immense for me. Rob?
I have enough trouble with math, so I'm not going to get into cell division. Hence, we saw that reason is in everything. Neither is reason, as most of us use it, entirely dependable, though it emanates from our best minds. What about people who prove that man could never fly? Yet we had been seeing another kind of flight, a spiritual liberation from this world. People rose above their problem. They said God made these things possible, and we only smiled. We had seen spiritual release, but like to tell ourselves it wasn't true.
Yeah, they said God made these things possible. Okay, let's say that this higher power made these things possible, and we kind of looked upon it and just kind of smiled. Well, guess what? We had seen spiritual release, but like to tell ourselves it wasn't true. You still kind of closed-minded. And again, I just kind of take you back to that enveloping kind of feeling that something bigger than you is afoot. And I think it's possible for you to rise above and actually be able to do something beyond just simple math, like Rob. And I'll admit that I have problems with it too. Rob?
Yeah, I love this. Bill was not a genius or anything like that, but the way he's put this all together is incredible. I am just amazed at somebody who did not have any theological training is putting this all together. Bill is telling us that we need a power in our life that is greater than us. We have to sweep away prejudice. We have to search honestly and diligently. Basically, that's what he's saying. Simple. But the way he writes, how the script of, how eloquent. It just, it amazes me. Some people will say the book is divinely put together. Well, when I see some of the stuff, because Bill was not a writer per se, that, but he was able to do all this, put this all together for us, and it's still, wow, incredible. I could go on forever, but I won't. And here is a powerful statement coming up right now.
Yep.
Actually, we were fooling ourselves. For deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or other, it is there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is really kind of the punctuation, if you will, to what Bill is trying to say to us with regard to a higher power, and all, the fundamental idea of a higher power is there, and it may be obscured, sure, by calamity, pomp, or by worship of other things, but there is faith. And in some form or another, there is faith, and it is in a power greater than ourselves. And we've got miraculous demonstrations, as I've talked about, that you can point to and say, we can't really explain that one as a science, with science or fact. We just know it is, and it does. It's something like that. The sun comes up every day. And we know it's going to happen. It's not a matter of whether we can explain it necessarily, but it's there, and we come to rely on it. And that's kind of a way to kind of come into this. Rob?
Yeah, for faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations, gut feeling, intuition, common sense, conscious of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. A lot of people say, where do I find God? Well, here Bill's telling us exactly where we find him, deep down inside. Every man, woman, and child is the fundamental belief of God. It's obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things. Some people worship money. Some people worship other people. It's obscured. We have other belief systems. But deep down inside, every man, woman, and child, that's where you find God. We have work to do. If it was just that easy, that's the program would end right here. But we have work to do. We finally saw the faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup, just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there. He was as much a fact as we were. We found the great reality deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found. It was so with us.
Yeah, not a lot to really say here other than the fact that there is some kind of higher power as a part of our makeup. If you just open up your mind, look for it, it's there. You just have to have that faith of just changing gears, if you will, to take faith and apply it to a higher power, and you can grasp onto it. Rob?
Yeah, we can only clear the ground a bit. If our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, enables you to think honestly, encourages you to search diligently within yourself, then if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. With this attitude, you cannot fail. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you.
Yeah, and it is a change in attitude. It really is. And this is stop thinking about yourself, stop being self-centered, stop being closed-minded, stop objecting to things, but to sit back and, again, like I said, find yourself and allow yourself to start asking questions about some of the things that cannot be explained. Ask yourself the things that you've had faith in, that you yourself have had faith in yourself and your abilities to do things. How do I take that faith and apply it in a different way? Those are some things that you basically need as you sit down and, again, kind of get into that meditative state. Allow yourself to be let go and to be able to find a new attitude towards having a willingness to believe in something bigger. And yes, you want to pay attention. That's absolutely true, Pete. Absolutely. And when we talk about this broad highway, we're talking about a spiritual awakening. All right. So think about it in those terms. Rob?
Yeah, now we're going to read a story about Fitzmail. So I'll probably go through the whole story, Leo, and then you can comment, okay? In this book, you will read the experience of a man who thought he was an atheist. This story is so interesting that some of it should be told now. His change of heart was dramatic, convincing, and moving. Our friend was a minister's son. He attended church school, where he became rebellious at what he thought an overdose of religious education. For years thereafter, he was dogged by trouble and frustration. Business failure, insanity, fatal illness, suicide. These calamities in his immediate family embittered and depressed him. Post-war disillusionment, ever more serious alcoholism, impending mental and physical collapse brought him to the point of self-destruction. One night, when confined in a hospital, he was approached by an alcoholic who had known a spiritual experience. Our friend's gorge rose as he bitterly cried out, "If there is a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me." But later, alone in his room, he asked himself this question: is it possible that all the religious people I've known are wrong? While pondering the answer, he felt as though he had lived in hell. Then, like a thunderbolt, a great thought came. It crowded out all else. Who are you to say there is no God? This man recounts that he tumbled out of bed to his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed by a conviction of the presence of God. It poured over and through him with the certainty and majesty of a great tide of flood. The barriers he had built through the years were swept away. He stood in the presence of infinite power and love. He had stepped from bridge to shore. For the first time, he lived in conscious companionship with his creator. Thus was our friend's cornerstone fixed in place. No later vicissitude had shaken him. His alcohol problem was taken away. That very night, years ago, appeared. Oh, I'm sorry. That very night, years ago, it disappeared. Save for a few brief moments of temptation, the thought of drink had never returned. And at such times, a great revulsion had risen up in him. Seemingly, he could not drink, even if he would. God had restored his sanity.
So what we basically have done is there's a man that has, he grew up in a religious family. He was surrounded by religion, and yet he was looking at it wholly differently, in that he, because of some bad things happening. Remember, we talked about dwelling on the bad. Well, he certainly was dwelling on the bad. He was not anticipating the good. And what he basically did was had this kind of overwhelming moment. And Bill W. also had one of those overwhelming moments that, came over him. I kind of came to it little bits at a time. I had a hard time and struggled. I was more of a science person and a fact person and a black and white person. It had to be, or else it wasn't. And I finally was able to figure out that, there is something else to this. And that's how I got there. So I'm a little bit different than Fitzmayo was, as his point, where it just came over him at once and got there. Our friend's cornerstone was fixed in place. No later vicissitude has shaken it. And that's no later difficulties, problems, or low points in his life has shaken it. Rob was describing that his feeling now has grown in the direction of anticipating the good. Certainly there's going to be pitfalls. There's going to be speed bumps in life. And yet he is anticipating the good. And so therefore he's able to face those times with a newfound confidence and strength. So take that and those pressure points, those triggers, those things that make us want to drink. If you have that anticipating the good and knowing the calamity and the consequences that comes with drinking, the bad that's going to happen because it's happened so many times before. If you can anticipate the good of not drinking and find that same level of confidence, that same level of power to be able to overcome that urge to drink, there you are finding your higher power. It's a great demonstration of actually tapping into that inner strength and finding your higher power. And that's a description of what we're kind of trying to say here with Fitzmayo. Fitzmayo was at his wit's end. He was in a hospital. He was at his bottom, and he was full of guilt, of remorse, anger, resentment. And yet he was looking around and finally said, wait a minute, can all these people be wrong? Can all of them be wrong? I don't think so. I don't think so. And it hit him like a bolt of lightning, just like it did Bill W. Well, with us, it's a similar type of thing. And what you really need to do is to be able to tap into that, look for the good of not drinking, realizing that when you wake up the next morning sober and that you feel so much better about life. I know I did. It was a sense of accomplishment, and it gave me even more confidence each day that I was able to wake up from not drinking and realizing not only did I live, but nobody's given me a hard time about not having a hangover. I mean, how many people will give you a hard time about not having a hangover? Come on, and yet we will refuse to experience that. I'm just saying, try it and feel that confidence, feel the sense of the success that comes with it, and you'll start to understand what it is to have a higher power. Rob?
Yeah, a lot of, this is the second time in the book that they've talked about a white light experience where all of a sudden, God comes directly into their life, which is why they've had to write the spiritual experience at the back, because everybody's expecting to have this experience and it's not coming. I can tell you my own experience was it was very slow, gradual. It was something that I never even realized had happened within me. And it wasn't until I was laid off at work and I walked out of the office, I just looked up and went, God, I know you got my back. I know you'll look after me. That's when I realized I had a spiritual experience, but it was so gradual that I didn't even realize that it happened. A lot of times you'll find out that people around you will notice the difference way before you do. Why? Because instead of being selfish and self-centered, now you're caring about other people. You're caring about things that are happening in their lives. Are you feeling okay today? You know, you look a little bit down. I see something in your eyes that there's no glow to them. Sometimes there's people that come in here and they have a glow in their eyes. You know, you just see it. They're lit up. And then sometimes they come to the meetings and they don't have that. And it's like, oh, is everything okay? You know, is everything going okay in your life? Well, you know, I haven't been feeling very well, or something else is going on in their life. You know, they have somebody that's ill, or they're worried about something. You know, you really notice it, you become attuned to it, because you care about people and you notice something about them. Something has changed. So why has something changed? You know, if it's good and you see a big smile on their face all the time, it's great. But when you see them down a little bit, their energy level is down a little bit. It's like, what's going on? Everything okay? Hey, we care about other people and we place them above ourselves. What is this but a simple miracle of healing? Yet its elements are simple. Circumstances made him willing to believe. He humbly offered himself to his maker. Then he knew. Even so, God has restored us all to our right mind. To this man, the revelation was sudden. Some of us grow into more slowly. But he has come to all who have honestly sought him. When we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us.
Absolutely. And I'm going to take you real quick with what is this but a miracle of healing? Yet his elements are simple and circumstances made him willing to believe. On page 60, almost all the way down at the bottom, it says the first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. Remember, you have tried and tried and tried to stop drinking on your own self-will. It is going to need, there is the miracle of healing. And I think the other part of this is that when we talked about the next morning and you wake up and you're feeling good, you don't have a hangover. Well, you know, you put a string of those together and all of a sudden your health is actually improving. And I can tell you, mine didn't, I mean, mine improved, but it took it more than 9 months before I realized physically how much better I was after I had stopped drinking. And things were starting to happen good for me in that regard. And even so has God restored us all to our right minds. That's really kind of an expression of step 2. And then as the revelation was sudden, it's a spiritual experience. That's what we're talking about here, is having a spiritual experience. And in this case, Fitzmayo had one that was sudden, and it's like we said, like a bolt of lightning. And some of us grow into it more slowly. And again, I'm going to raise my hand and say that it took me some time. I really was actually having a hard time, you know, separating X from Y and really kind of equating all of that to you know, something that I could work with. And it wasn't until I actually opened up and started looking for that higher power that I actually found it. And that's one of the other things you've got to be able to be willing to do, and that is to open up and start looking for it. We drew near to close that this is, you know, over time, you're going to get even closer and closer to your higher power. And part of that is just practice. It actually comes to you. Bottom line is you need to find something more powerful than yourself. That's really where it comes from. And I know that's easier said than done. Some of us have it in an immediate moment, and some of us it takes time. A couple of things I want to make note here at the end here is, one is you need to believe before you can have faith. You need to believe something will happen before you believe that it or that can happen before it will happen. I said that wrong, Rob. You need to believe that something will happen. Can happen before it will happen. Again, I'm getting backwards there. I apologize. And, some of us have been in those, what we call foxhole prayers, or praying to what I've heard is the porcelain God when you're, hugging a toilet, that kind of thing. If you can just get me out of this situation, I promise I won't drink again. If you can just get me through tonight, I promise I won't drink again. Well, okay, something's amiss there, and something's going on that, I'll just say this. God really didn't get you through that necessarily. So you did it again and again and again. But here it is. This beyond that is what you're looking for, and having faith that you can get through it. Rob?
Yeah, I've made a few notes. I want to throw this, but he has come to all who have honestly sought him. On page 46, God does not make too hard terms for those who seek him. Now, for some reason, I thought it said for those who honestly seek him, but you know what? God is always there, but we have to knock on the door and open the door and let him in, and then he will be there. So here are some of the few notes that I made. Okay, Bill's trying to convince us that we have a need for a higher power. There is a higher power, and I am not it. Wow, what a revelation that was. We need a power greater than ourselves. Our human power failed. We are the problem. We are not the solution. There is a need for a God. We are blocking ourselves off from God. And here's the big one that I could not remember last week. Coincidences are God's way of staying anonymous. So we take a look at all the anonymous things that happen when we look back in our life and all the incredible things that have happened. And that's God's way of staying anonymous. Leo was saying that, belief is that something could happen. Faith is that it will happen. So we start with willingness, and we come to belief that it could happen. It could happen. And then faith is that we know it's going to happen. And that's a big one. And the more we practice these principles and practice these things, the prayers, asking God for help to take this thing away, to help this person out. Once we start practicing these principles and we see them working in our lives, the more we come to rely on them. But it's getting people to start praying. Take away self. When we get up in the morning, we do the step 11 prayers, okay, 86 to 88, the 24-hour clock. And we ask God to take self out of the picture so that I can do God's work. What is your will for me today, God? I'm ready to do it. So take self out of it so that I can be God conscious. Where do you want to go now, Leo? You want to go to how it works?
Well, no, I'm gonna go back on page 46 real quick. Okay.
You got it.
As soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, the spirit of the universe, underlying the totality of things, we began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction, provided we took other simple steps. And those are the steps that Rob was just outlining. It's kind of that looking for the good, asking yourself what is the next right thing to do, and doing it. And then asking yourself again, what is the next right thing to do, and then doing it as we go along. And I want to spend, well, not spend a lot, but I want to spend a little time here, because finding that higher power, especially for a non-believer, somebody that's closed-minded, is a difficult thing to do. And I think as a sponsor, or somebody working with a newcomer or a sponsee, and they are objecting to this whole idea of a higher power, you really have to kind of be able to kind of tap into their thinking in order to get them to get out of their own selves and their own thinking. And there's a bit of work that needs to happen there in order to get them to get to where you want them to be. And I think asking them some of these questions about having faith in yourself, in your ability to do something, worshiping something other than a higher power, such as money, and really kind of start to get them to think about those things, you'll find that you can actually start to move them in the direction of having a willingness to believe that there is a higher power. And remember, the simplest of things has to happen, and that is just a willingness to believe. When you do that, though, there's an exercise that needs to happen, and that is you need to start anticipating the good as opposed to dwelling on the bad. The bad thing is there, accepting things that have happened in the past and kind of trying to move beyond that, learning from those mistakes, but moving beyond that is an exercise that needs to happen. And then from there, taking that and starting to anticipate the good, realizing that when you have got a day of sobriety under your belt and that feels good, focusing on that good, feeling that good, and starting to expand on that good, and then turning that one day into a week, and turning that week into a month, and turning that month into a year, and then so on and so forth, a year into a decade, etc., is really important. But you have to want to do that, and it's going to have to get down to that personal level and that very, very, very honest kind of looking within to do that. You can't just go, I can't just go to Rob and say, hey, I believe when I really don't believe. I've got to be able to sit there and say to myself that I truly believe that there is something bigger afoot, that there is something else that can't be explained by science, etc. And that's where you are. It's a tough thing. Those that don't want to get it it's difficult to work with them. Those that want to get it but need just the help to get there are the people that you really want to focus on and really try to work with. And before we get started, I'm just going to turn it over to Bill, and we're going to finish things out with We Agnostics, and then that way we can start fresh next Saturday on the 19th on how it works right from the very beginning. Bill?
Hi, this is Bill, alcoholic from New Jersey. Thanks a lot, Leo and Rob. Good job here today. This is a tough chapter to get through. There's a lot of real deep stuff in here. Now, the stuff that we were talking about, we started on page 52. It talks about these bedevilments, and basically that could be called a dry drunk or untreated alcoholism. I know a lot of people besides alcoholics go through some of this stuff, but as alcoholics, we have this stuff in the extreme. These are things that if you don't get treated for alcoholism, if you're not a recovered alcoholic and you try to stop drinking, you're going to have all of these things that are listed here as these bedevilments. You're going to have trouble with your personal relationships. Your emotions are going to be out of control. That doesn't happen to normal people when they don't drink. When an alcoholic doesn't drink, that's the kind of stuff that happens to us. And that's why we need this process to go through so that we can be recovered and then we can get rid of all of this kind of stuff. These are the things that just come in and they eat us. And these are basically the opposite of the promises that we'll get to later. But this is like for untreated alcoholism, and the promises are for when you have treated alcoholism. And again, there's a lot of stuff in here. It talks on page 53 about the second step proposition. God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What is your choice to be? They're asking each individual, what is your choice to be? You can choose to have God in your life or not to have God in your life. Basically, I think what Bill is trying to say to us is, now it's time to change your mind. Most of us, when we came into AA, we probably fell into a category of being agnostic. Well, whether we believed in something or not, we didn't think it was going to help us. We didn't think that we were able to pray to anything or get any kind of help or any kind of spirituality. And he's just telling us, now it's time to change your mind because we need to look for something. And he told us on page 54, basically what he's saying is everybody is born with some type of faith. Little babies have faith that their mother will feed them. Faith is part of our makeup. Even though we don't realize it, even though we don't know that we have this faith, faith is part of our makeup as being human beings. We have faith in things without even knowing it. And most of our life, we use faith in something, whatever it was, so we were getting through whatever we had to do to get through. And it tells us on page 55 that we were fooling ourselves, for deep down inside every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. That means the basic conception. This book is telling me that deep down inside every one of us, we have the fundamental idea of God. Whether you believe in God or not, there's something deep down inside of us that is the fundamental idea of God. And he's telling us where we can find it. And he tells us sometimes we have to search fearlessly, but he was there. He was as much a fact as we were. We found the great reality deep down within us. He's telling you where you can look for God, where you're going to find God. You don't have to climb up to the top of a mountain or go down to the bottom of the sea. God is deep down within us. That's where you're going to find whatever you're going to believe in. It's going to be deep down inside of you. And he tells us, well, the second to the last paragraph, he says, with this attitude, you cannot fail. What attitude? He gave us three things in this paragraph to do. One, you sweep away prejudice. Prejudice means you prejudge something. Get rid of your old ideas. Sweep away prejudice. Then he tells us, think honestly. And then he tells us, search diligently within yourself. If you do those three things, that's the attitude he's talking about. You cannot fail. You will find something. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. So if you get rid of prejudice, you think honestly, and you search diligently, you're going to find something, whatever it is. And everybody could find a different thing. And then he goes into he talks about this guy, Fitzmayo. Fitzmayo was the third guy to get sober in the New York area. And Bill Wilson found him in the town's hospital in the fall of 1935. And this guy got sober. His sober date was November of 1935. And he stayed sober for 8 years, and he wound up dying when he was 46 years old in 1943. He died of cancer. He died sober. He was sober that whole time. And he's one of the real important guys because he's the guy that went to Washington, D.C. and looked up the names of that Bill gave him for the big book. He went to the Library of Congress and looked them up because he lived in Maryland and he was close to Washington, D.C. And he looked up all of that stuff. And he talks in here about where he says, who are you to say there is no God? This man recounts he tumbled out of bed to his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed by the conviction of the presence of God. That's Fitz describing his spiritual experience. Just like was mentioned, Bill had a spiritual experience. This guy Fitz had a spiritual experience. And this is his spiritual experience that he mentioned in here. And it tells us on the last page, it says, God had restored his sanity. That's a reference to step 2 where it says we will be restored to sanity. It doesn't say Dr. Silkworth restored his sanity or Bill Wilson restored his sanity. God restored his sanity. So basically what they're saying is because this guy got God in his life, he thought he was an atheist, and then he realized he wasn't, that he actually believed in God. He was able to get better. He was able to have a spiritual experience because he got God in his life. And what AA is doing, AA is not trying to convince you who God is or what God is or whether there is a God or not. All AA is trying to convince us of is that we have a need for a God. Because we're powerless over alcohol, we have to get a power greater than ourselves in our life. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to defeat alcoholism. That's basically as simple as it comes down to. Step 2 is the answer to step 1. That's all I got. Thanks a lot for letting me share.
Thank you so much, Bill.
Yep. Thank you very much. All right. Let's go ahead and close Rob with the serenity prayer, and then we'll open it up for some good discussion.
Okay, first I just have to say that Bill has his own Big Book meeting at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Friday mornings. Incredible study. And now the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.